Today we got our final sermon in the series, The Judges, and we're looking at the last judge, which is Samuel. We have a slide, so I'm going to cover the whole of the book of Samuel, 28 chapters. Won't take too long. In fact, I've condensed it into a story, and then just 2 points out of that to cover today. 2 things that stood out to me. Beautiful, devout Hannah sat on her own in the temple in Shiloh during the annual pilgrimage to worship God and to offer sacrifices to Israel's God. The fact that she was adored by her husband Elkanah was not enough to heal the deep sense of sadness and shame that Hannah felt, not being able to have a child. Tonight during dinner, Hannah, who was Elkanah's second wife and his baby mama, hurled another of her cruel taunts at Hannah, and it was just the last straw for Hannah. So as Hannah sat praying silently and sobbing uncontrollably, she appeared to the old and sight-impaired priest Eli to be drunk. He shuffled over to her. "Excuse me, lady, are you drunk?" And in the words of Dooney, "That's not cool." "No, sir, I'm not a wicked woman. I'm not drunk. I'm a devout follower of God, and I'm pouring out my heart to Him. I asked Him to answer my prayer, and I made a vow to Him that if He will answer it and He will give me a child, He'll give me a son, then I'll give that child back to Him to serve Him all the days of his life." Eli the priest was really touched by Hannah's words, and he simply replied to her, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel give you what you've asked for." I don't think Eli had any idea of the impact of those words for Hannah, but the instant Hannah heard them, something happened, something shifted inside her, quite supernaturally, and she felt a new sense of hope for the first time in a very long time. And sure enough, within weeks, Hannah was pregnant. And within a year, she gave birth to a beautiful, perfect little boy. The answer to her prayers and the healing of her heart. And she named him Samuel because she said, "I asked God for him." After the most beautiful 3 years of her life, cradling, breastfeeding, loving that little baby who'd grown into a little toddler by then, she weaned him. And she prepared Samuel for her end of the bargain. As unimaginable when she thought of it, of having to give him up, how unimaginable that was to her, she kept her focus on the other thing that was so valuable to her, and that was worshipping God. Her sense that God had answered her prayer, not just for a baby, but for a baby that would grow into a man who would serve God all the days of his life, gave her such a sense of joy and a quiet peace. "My Lord, remember me?" Hannah said to Eli. "I'm the drunk woman, remember? I'm the woman you thought was drunk that night. Look, I prayed for a baby, and you blessed me. And look what the Lord has done. Now I've brought him here to give him to God and to give him to serve you in the temple for all the days of his life." This was such a powerful moment, such a God moment, such an awesome moment, truly awesome, that all Eli, Elkanah, and Hannah could do was worship together. Hannah freestyled an original praise song. She danced her victory dance, and it was an amazing moment for all of them. Samuel's new home was a very interesting one. Eli the priest was old, and the place was not set up for children. The toys and the high chairs had all long been gone on the council clean-up, and instead of having a rocking horse in the corner, there was a gold-covered chest which contained the stone tablets with the 10 Commandments. This was the focus. So Eli did his best. He made a space in the temple for a little boy to sleep. It was definitely a bedroom of the wow factor. Thankfully, Samuel was a compliant and easy child, and Eli was quietly astounded at the ease with which the little boy adapted to his strange new world. On the other hand, Eli's adult sons were scoundrels. They were supposed to be serving with their father, but they didn't care about God. They were corrupt and they were immoral. And amid this dysfunctional mess, little Samuel grew up. He grew up physically strong and straight and spiritually strong and straight, learning how to serve the Lord like a little duck to water. He looked forward to seeing his parents whenever they visited and they came to worship at Shiloh, always bringing him the next size up little junior priest tunic. Of course, they missed him terribly too, but they held such a deep sense of pride in his calling, and seeing him grow up year after year just reinforced it. One night, as Samuel was sleeping in his awesome bedroom, he heard a voice calling his name, and he jumped up and he ran to Eli. "Here I am, you called me." "No, I didn't call you. Go back to bed," said Eli. So Samuel went back to bed, and then a second time he heard Samuel. He jumped up and ran over to Eli. "Here I am, you called me." And then it dawned on Eli that maybe it was God speaking to Samuel. So he said to Samuel, "Go and lay down again, and if you hear the voice again, then just simply say, 'Speak, Lord, your servant is listening.'" So Samuel obeyed, and before long he saw the Lord standing beside him. And God said, "Samuel, Samuel." And with the innocence of a child, he said, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." And for the first time in a very long time, God spoke. And his voice was heard, but not to the adults. To a boy, to a 12-year-old boy who was listening. And God didn't give him an easy message. He downloaded a heavy message for Eli and his sons. Judgment against Eli's sons for their behaviour, and judgment against Eli for not holding them accountable. When the Lord left, Samuel's head was swimming with the information that was just too much for a boy to hold, but at the same time, Samuel was left with a sense of awe at the sound of God's voice. Every word was crystal clear. He was hooked, and he knew that's what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. The next morning, Samuel kept himself very busy, hoping that Eli had forgotten all about it. But of course, Eli hadn't forgotten. And he asked Samuel to tell him everything. Being scared about what might happen if he didn't, Samuel told him everything. And in the same avoidant way that Eli had dealt with his sons, he just simply responded, "Well, he's the Lord, let him do whatever he thinks is good." God and Samuel were now a team, and very soon all of Israel knew it. Samuel's gift, his prophetic record, was flawless. In fact, it soon became hard to tell the difference between God's voice and Samuel's voice. God spoke to Samuel, Samuel spoke to Israel, and then God fulfilled his words. God fulfilled his words concerning Eli and his sons. During a battle with the Philistines, 30,000 Israelites were killed, including Eli's 2 sons. And the Ark of God, which was the most sacred relic with the 10 Commandments, was taken by the Philistines. When Eli heard the news, more about the Ark of God being taken than his own sons, he fell back. He got such a terrible shock. He fell back, he broke his neck, and he died. So in the space of a day, Samuel was living in a ghost town. No priest, no sons, no ark. But God was with Samuel. God was the king, Samuel was the priest and the prophet and the judge or the leader of Israel to the best of his ability. And sometimes he had to give him a bit of tough love. One day Samuel addressed Israel and he said, "If you guys are serious about coming back to God, then clean your act up. Get rid of the foreign gods and learn what it is to worship God alone." So Israel cleaned out their idols, they fasted, they prayed, they confessed their sin, and they prepared for war. Samuel interceded, God thundered, the Philistines panicked, and Israel won. And so it was for the rest of Samuel's life that the Philistines and the Amorites, the main enemies of Israel, were never a problem again. Every year, Samuel went on the preaching circuit, the leadership circuit, to all the different tribes. But he always looked forward to coming back to Ramah, his home, his happy place, where he'd set up an altar and where he spent his time worshipping God. It was his favourite place to be. Samuel led Israel until he simply wore out. He was old, his body was tired. He'd had an amazing run. But he was human and he knew the time had come for him to hand over the leadership reins. However, Samuel's sons, like Eli's sons, were nothing like their father. They were corrupt and they were in it for what they could get. So the elders of Israel confronted Samuel. Samuel, you're old and we hate your sons. So give us a king like everyone else. Samuel was devastated. This was not the ending he had planned for himself, for his sons, or for God. So Samuel did what he always did. He went to God. This is not the plan, God. This is not what we planned together. And God's response, I think, was so beautiful. It revealed the depth of their relationships. God said, look, I know your kids are useless. I understand that. But really, Samuel, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me, like they always have. It's okay, Samuel, give them what they want. So Samuel put his retirement plans on hold to usher in the king that God chose for Israel. And he did it with the same attention to detail as he'd always done. Samuel addressed Israel. He said, I've done what you asked. You have your king. Now I'm old and grey. I've done my best to serve you faithfully. Do you have any complaints about me? No, the people cried out. As God is witness, we have nothing against you. Samuel helped establish Saul. He supported, he advised Saul, he warned Saul. And then when it all fell apart as God said it would, he brought judgment on Saul. And then he and God did it all over again, setting up God's new man, David. Samuel never left his post, listening to God, encouraging Israel, and sometimes bringing the tough love and the occasional execution. When Samuel died at the ripe old age of 96, all of Israel mourned for him, and everyone came to the funeral to honour him. Samuel had served God and the people faithfully as a prophet, as a priest, and as the last judge of Israel for 93 years. And his body came to lay to rest in his happy place of Ramah. That's the headlines of the story of Samuel. Pretty awesome. And on Friday in our Connect group, we just looked at Samuel chapter 1, Samuel being born. And there was so much just in that one chapter that people brought out of that. There's just so much in that story that we couldn't even touch on in 28 chapters. But there's two things that I just that stood out to me in that story. And I don't know whether there's things that stood out to you in that story, but two things that I just wanted to focus on today. The first thing is simply this: God is faithful, but there are no formulas in life. We could easily take from this story that there is a formula. Hannah prayed, God answered, Samuel fulfilled his destiny and served God all his days right. We can say, well, we can pray, and maybe some of you have prayed and God has answered in that way. But I think this story teaches us that it doesn't always work that way, because Samuel was faithful. And his boys didn't serve God for all their days. God and Samuel worked tirelessly together. God and Samuel worked tirelessly to keep Israel on track, right? But they rarely were on track. They went on that cycle over and over and over again, following God, getting off the track, being judged, repenting, coming back. God and Samuel worked for 96 years, 93 years together, and they never quite could control Israel. Hannah's prayer worked, Samuel's prayer didn't. There are no formulas in life for us. And I think we can easily fall into, or as Christians, I don't know whether that's been your journey where you've prayed for something and just, it hasn't worked out the way you hoped. It's worked out one way for other people, but it hasn't worked out that way in your life. There's a verse, I think, that we've all heard. I'm sure we've all heard it. It says, believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved, you and your household. And we've taken that if I'm saved, then my household's saved, my family's saved, my kids are saved, my parents are saved, my siblings are saved. We take that as kind of a promise from God. But actually what that verse is really saying is that in the same way you're saved, your family members have the opportunity to be saved. It's not a formula in it. It's just, it's the opportunity that we all have to see that God is faithful in our lives. And the truth is that as much as we may want to, and I want to too, we can't control other people. We can't control their faith journey. People's faith journey, our kids' faith journey, our parents' faith journey, our family's faith journey, our friends' faith journey is their responsibility. Of course, we are responsible for our witness to them and how we represent God to them. And sometimes we have to come before God and say, Lord, what have I done? If I'm causing someone to stumble in their journey, then I have to come and ask God to reveal that, and I might have to apologise about that. I might have to repent about that. But the truth is that we're responsible for our own faith journey. Everybody's responsible for their own faith journey, as Samuel was, as Samuel's sons were, as Eli was. And this feels a bit scary, doesn't it? Because we want to have that assurance. We want to know that the journey that we've taken is the journey that our loved ones have taken. We want to have that assurance that they're right with God. But I think the thing to focus on, and the other thing that comes out of this story, is that God is faithful. And when we look at that story, we just see God's faithfulness to all of those people. God is who he says he is. We sang so many great songs this morning. We sang, Lord, you are good. We sang about the goodness of God coming after us. We sang in the new song, God is our champion, and all those things are so true. And they're the things that we hold on to when we can't control people and their journey in our lives and the people that we love and they're all going AWOL. We hold on to the fact that God is faithful. In the same way that he loved Israel, the same way that he loved Samuel is the way he loves us. God was faithful to Samuel for 96 years. It's a long time. I don't know whether I'm going to live for 96 years. But God is faithful to Samuel in all of that. He keeps on trying. He doesn't give up. He had another plan up his sleeve anyway. As Vicky said, God's with us no matter what we go through. God is faithful. There are no formulas in our lives, but God is faithful. And the second thing that I wanted to focus on is this idea of a long obedience in the same direction. I read this in a book recently and I thought, what a lovely way to put it. What an amazing life Samuel had. What an amazing life Mercy's father had. Just a long obedience in the same direction. Part of the reason that it's so amazing is that it's not common, is it? To live a life where you start out on a journey to God is easy, so easy. How many people do we know that have come to faith but then don't continue? Because it's really easy to be attracted to aspects of following God, but to follow God for your whole life, however long that is not such an easy thing to do. We try anything until something better comes along. And the evidence for mature Christians, mature discipleship is pretty slim. How many really mature Christians do you know that you would say, wow, that person is really mature in their faith? I don't think there's too many really, is there? We flip and flop and we're in and out. But Samuel teaches us that it's possible to serve God and to be obedient in that same direction for our whole lives. We're called to be disciples. Disciples are people that we're apprenticed to Jesus like our master, and we keep on learning, we keep on growing. Mariana in the prayer meeting this morning prayed this beautiful prayer. She said, there's always more of you to get to know God. So we're always growing, we're always learning, and we have to keep going in that same direction. We have to keep being in a long obedience in the same direction if we're going to truly be disciples. And if we are pilgrims on the journey, then we're going to spend our time going somewhere, and we're going to God like Samuel did. We're disciples and we're pilgrims. The challenge is, and it is a challenge, it's a huge challenge for us, this obedience, long obedience in the same direction. It's not an easy thing to do, and that's why most people don't do it. Hebrews 12:1 and 2 puts out this beautiful challenge to us. Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame. He sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. I love in there what I see in those verses is the plural, the us, the we, the our. And this idea of the witnesses is that, all of heaven, the witnesses of heaven are watching us. That's part of what we take from this. Watching to see how we continue our journey, our long obedience in the same direction. But I don't think it's only the people in heaven that are watching us. It's us as a community. We're part of the witnesses that help each other get on our journey to the long obedience. To achieve a long obedience, we need each other. And I think when I look at Samuel and I look at the fact that he kept coming back to the temple to worship God, he kept being with God, he kept being with the people. That was his life, that was his long obedience. And I feel like that really just reinforces what we're trying to do here as Christians, what we're trying to do here as a little community of Embassy. We're all different, but we all want the same thing. We want to be together because it's encouraging to be together. We want to worship together like we did this morning. We want to pray together. We want to pray together at the prayer meeting and learn what it is to pray together, because the more we can pray together, the more we can worship together, the better chance we've got of a long obedience in the same direction. When we're together, our feelings for God are nurtured and our needs and our priorities are changed. On Friday night at our Connect group, one of our girls came and she just had the most horrible afternoon. Terrible shock. And she said, being with you is so encouraging. It was so encouraging to me. We prayed with her, we encouraged her, we looked at Samuel's life, she took something from that. Being together is part of what it means to be on that long journey together. To be a long obedience in the same direction. Sina said, we care. What did you say, Sina? I wrote this down. I thought it was so good in the prayer meeting. We care as a family and we draw our attention back to Jesus. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? We need each other. The goal for us is a long obedience in the same direction like Samuel had. And the best way we're going to get there is with each other. I guess that's what I want to say in all of that, round and round. It's important. We need each other. We love each other. And so as we kind of wrap this up and bring it to a point of our response to it, what in Samuel's story has spoken to you? What is it that God's speaking to you in all of this? It's an amazing story. He lived an incredible life. He was a 1 in a million. He heard God's voice. I think Ree prayed that in the prayer meeting this morning. He heard about us hearing God's voice. We need to hear God's voice, and we can hear God's voice. All of us now, with the Holy Spirit, we have that opportunity to hear God's voice. What is He saying to you today? Could I just invite you to stand as we